Now, the first question we've got to ask is this. What is the fear of the Lord? Let me say this, students, and I want you to hear me before you automatically just shut me down. The fear of the Lord is not to be scared of God. Okay? When Israel came out of Egypt, do you remember Moses led them out? Students, let me ask you, when Moses brought Israel out of Egypt, where were they going? Everybody yell it. The promised land. No, that is not right. What did Moses say to Pharaoh 5 times? Thus saith the Lord, let my people go that they might worship me in the wilderness. Why does Moses want to bring them to a promised land before he first brings them to the promiser? If you bring them to the promised land before bringing them to the promiser, they're going to make the promised land into a place of idolatry. See, I see an amazing thing. I look at Israel, they're abused by Egypt. They have stripes on their backs. Their babies are put to death. They are working all their lives to build somebody else's inheritance. They are eating the worst, the slum. They're living in the slums. Yet they come out of Egypt, and you know what they constantly say? Let's go back to Egypt. It was better for us back in Egypt. I look at Moses. Moses is raised in the wealthiest man's house on the planet. His grandfather, Pharaoh, is the richest man on earth. He lives in a castle, a palace. He can do whatever he wants. He can have every Lamborghini in the collection. He can have every Harley he wants. He can throw a national party anytime he wants. But he comes out of Egypt, and Moses never once says, it was better for me back in Egypt. Why? Because he had one encounter with God at that bush, and he wanted Israel to have the same. And so Moses brings Israel straight to Sinai. And when he does, he goes up to the mountain and has a private meeting with God. And God says to Moses in Exodus 19, he says, Moses, go down and tell the people the whole reason I delivered you from Egypt was to bring you to me. He said, I have called every one of them to be a kingdom of priests. God wanted every one of them to be able to approach him personally. And so God said to Moses, tell them to get ready. And part of the process of getting ready is he said, for the next 2 days, tell them to wash their clothes. Get the filth of Egypt off of you, because I'm coming down. And before I ever revealed myself as a loving God, I first revealed myself as a holy God. And in the center of that holiness is my love. And so when God comes down on the mountain, I mean to tell you, these people, they run from God. Why? Because they've got a little bit too much of Egypt still in their hearts. And Moses is utterly confused by their response. And he looks at them in Exodus 20:20, and he says, do not fear, because God's come to test you. What's the test, Moses? To see if his fear is in you so you may not sin. Now look up at me, everybody. Do not fear, because God's come to test you. What's the test? To see if his fear is in you. Well, wait a minute. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Do not fear, because God's come to see if his fear is in you. Moses is differentiating between being scared of God and the fear of the Lord. There is a difference. The person who is scared of God has something to hide. What does Adam do as soon as he sins? He hides from the presence of God. The person who fears God has nothing to hide. He or she is terrified of being away from God. So if you want the first definition of the holy fear of God, it is to be terrified of being away from him.